I'm Sophia, and this is the ultimate podcast for celebrating all things wonderful about our beautiful island. Welcome to Destination Cyprus. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Destination Cyprus, a podcast by Cybarco. I'm super excited today. I've been throwing that word around a lot over the last 24 hours because I'm joined in our studio by a guest I have been hounding for a year since we launched the podcast because I really wanted to speak to him. He's what I would call a very notable Cypriot, particularly in a specific industry that we're going to talk all about today. John Leonida, welcome. Finally.
Finally, I'm here.
You are. It's so great to have you with us, and thank you for taking the time. I know that you're only visiting for the moment. I want to tell a quick story about how I met you because we have kept in touch for years, and actually when I was flicking through these books, it frightened me how many years it's been.
It's been the length of a Bible.
Indeed, indeed. And I'll always remember telling my parents this story when I came back from Monaco that year. I really wish I could remember which year it was, 2017,
I think.
It was that far back. Okay. And I can remember I was at the Superyacht rendezvous. I mean, what an event. I think it was a Boat International event. Lots of super yachts at Port Hercules and lots of gold flake champagne.
I think what you're referring to is the champagne mojitos, which were lethal.
A little bit lethal. But the actual night that I met you, there were some super yacht awards at Hotel de Paris on the balcony. And I can remember seeing a dapper gentleman in a three-piece suit, a bow tie, smoking a pipe. And I have no idea how we struck up conversation. But I can remember thinking the sophistication, the style, the elegance. And then all of a sudden I said, "Where are you from?" And you said, "Drodos."
I mean, yes. I mean, that.
What are the chances?
I mean, a pipe, a three-piece suit and a bow tie screams Drodos, doesn't it? Clearly, no.
Oh, dear. So that's just one of those memories that I will always have. And I think we got chatting about Cyprus, and something that I didn't know at the time, obviously, that I got to know over the course of my time in Monaco and then all the other events, is how integral you were to the super yacht industry and to the sector. And that's something that I think we will get to eventually. I want to start back in the sort of academia days. You started with economics, so a BA in economics, then political economics, and then you decided to go over and do a diploma in legal practice. How was that?
How was that journey?
Yeah.
Circuitous. Circuitous. I mean, if truth be told, I mean, I qualified as a lawyer when I was 34. However, my journey to the law started probably when I was about 9, when my late father, who was a barber, and originally from Galabanaiotis in Drodos, he came from a whole family of barbers. In fact, my paternal grandmother, her surname is Gurea, which pretty much meant that everyone associated with her would be barbers. In fact, her brothers were barbers. My father was a barber. They were all barbers. And my late father had a barber shop in Peckham in southeast London. And he was a regular listener to Radio 2, and in particular the Jimmy Young Show. And on the Jimmy Young Show, once a week, he would have David Tench, the legal eagle. And I was fascinated with stories of what happens when your shoes break and you take them back to the shoe shop to get them replaced. And that kind of stayed with me. And when I turned 18 and I was thinking about university, there were two directions, either the law or economics. And at that moment, I was more interested in economics and what made the world tick than the law. And so I went to Sussex and read economics, and on graduation I joined the Foreign Office and worked on Indian trade development and microeconomic development trade work. Thereafter I picked up the MA in political economics, but whilst I was doing that economics work, a lot of my friends had qualified as lawyers, and they said, "You've still got a bit of a legal mind." So whilst I was doing that, I left the Foreign Office, joined British Telecom, and I was doing PR and competition analysis. And at night school, I went to University of Westminster and picked up a law degree, and there we are.
Was that one of those law conversions?
No,
so you
that
didn't
was,
do it in a year?
No, that was I did it over 4 years.
Full on. Oh, wow.
I did a full law degree, whilst working in PR and competition analysis. Well, there we are, and ended up as a lawyer.
And then came the first job in law. So you started as a trainee solicitor, then associate solicitor, and then Clyde & Co. Let's talk about Clyde & Co.
Let's talk about Clyde & Co. I joined Clyde & Co. after a false start at Watson, Farley & Williams, who are a very big marine firm. And surprisingly, I wasn't in the marine department. And I really didn't get what I was doing at Watson's. And in fact, one of their partners pulled me into his office and said, "John, is law the right thing for you?" And we'll circle back to that. And it really wasn't working. So I left Watson's and joined Clyde's, and I was doing shipping work. Oil tankers, anchor handlers, tugs, proper dirty boats. And no yachts at all. I was about 3 years qualified, and a Saudi gentleman came into the office and wanted to buy a Sunseeker Predator 80. And it was tiny compared to the work we were doing. And as I was then the most junior member of the team, I was 34, but still the most junior member of the team, they said, "I'll just give it to Leonida." It was $2 million. It's not a lot. Just let him get on with it. And I was faced with this yacht. I didn't even know what a yacht was, to be brutally honest with you. And I'd only bought and sold big ships. So I took this Sunseeker and I dealt with it as if I would deal with an oil tanker. And that absolutely terrified the yacht brokers I was working with. And they suddenly realized, hang on, the way that we've been buying and selling boats, it has risks for us. But John's done something which we haven't done before.
Okay.
And cut a very long story short, I was 3 years qualified at the time, and I turned around to the partners at the firm. I said, "I think we can make a go at this. This yacht thing isn't rocket science." So they said, "Go for it." They gave me a business development budget. And I was probably the first lawyer in the modern era to call himself a superyacht lawyer. And things I did on that very first sale is still used by the industry. And I was doing stuff because we were making stuff up as we were going along because it hadn't been done before. And that was super exciting. But there we are.
And it's amazing. So that was going to be one of my questions, was why yachts, why super yachts? Because I assumed maybe there was some great passion as a child, but it was almost accidentally presented to you as an opportunity and you grabbed it and away you went.
Although, yes, there is that accidental moment of that individual coming in and, that lawyer saying, John should do this. But yachts have always been there in the background. I remember in 1967 being carried on the shoulders of my uncle Evavora at Greenwich when Sir Francis Chichester who had just sailed around the world, was knighted in the grounds of the Royal Naval College. And I remember sitting on his shoulders, and as the Queen brought the sword down to knight him, and bear in mind my uncle was reading to me Alice in Wonderland, I thought the Queen was about to take his head off, because that's what queens do, off with his head. But no, she merely knighted him. And it was there that I was fascinated with boats. I mean, I at the time was living in Deptford, and the Cutty Sark, that wonderful tea clipper, is in dry dock at Greenwich, and you take the Cutty Sark, and you take the Gypsy Moth, which Chichester sailed in on. I mean, and I always had this fascination with boats, and it kind of made sense. So when I started doing super yachts, it was almost a natural home for me.
But things must have changed so much since then, though. I mean, the industry itself and the number of super yachts out there. Because I can remember, obviously, one of the reasons why we met was the job at Limassol Marina, because we started attending all the yacht shows and the events. I couldn't believe what a small number there were at the time. I mean, it's growing now. What's the value of the industry at the moment?
I can't remember what the value is, but there are more than over 30 meters. There are more than 6,500 super yachts, which doesn't sound a great number.
No.
But it's an industry that is worth billions.
I think they forecast something like 50 by 2028, 50 billion.
Yeah, it is. It's nuts, but it's not an industry that is new.
No.
I mean, the word super yacht, for example, was first coined in 1912 in The Economist, when they were writing about Lloyd George's budget of the day, and he'd just introduced a tax on wealth, which for the first time, and the Economist wrote, we have the super motor car, the super aeroplane, the super yacht, and now we have the super tax. And that's the very first time the word super yacht appears in print. And that was 1912. But if you go back to the restoration of the English throne in 1661, I think it was, Charles II rather, comes back from Holland on a boat, which is a yacht. And yacht was the type of ship that the Dutch had given him, which was a fast pursuit vessel. And yacht with a J means to hunt in Dutch. And that's why we have the word yacht. But there we are.
And I mean, we say Clyde and Co. as if in passing, but you're talking 23, was it 23 years?
Pretty much. And
so in those 23 years, I mean, the scope of work that you were doing, you became a super yacht ambassador, didn't you?
It went from buying and selling second-hand tonnage, like Sunseekers, to not just negotiating the building of some of the most significant yachts in the super yacht fleet, but advising on the design of yachts, the financing of yachts. And I developed a reputation for trying to change some of the bad habits that were going on in the industry. Wherever you have lots and lots of money, there will always be people who will seek to take advantage. And I became, and some people describe me as being the conscience of the industry, of turning work down, which I didn't think was appropriate work, calling out corruption. I mean, I remember, I can't remember the year, but I remember writing an article for the Super Yacht Report, which was published just before the Monaco Yacht Show. And I called out some of the illegal practices that were ongoing, things that I'd seen, and said that these things had to stop because it was frankly corruption. And at that Monaco Yacht Show, I was threatened with physical violence because I dared to stick my head above the parapet. And every single time When things were wrong, I would call it out, whether it was tax evasion, whether it was bribery, whether it was corruption, whether it was sharp practice in the construction of yachts, and things which are now fairly standard in yacht construction contracts came out of trying to protect my clients. I mean, for example, it used to be the case that when you were building a super yacht, there would be a milestone that was triggered by an event. What was happening with some yachts is that they were artificially triggering events in order to get paid early. I introduced dates, not earlier than, if you will. And that's become kind of standard practice. But it's that I wasn't afraid to challenge the norms because this was a business worth billions. And if people are going to spend anything up to 300 million euros on a super yacht, they want to feel that they're being dealt with fairly. And there it is.
Well, I'd like to say that it's just that know-how and that expertise that has made you such an integral part of the sector. But obviously, there's a lot more to that. I mean, you've been called in for awards every time there's an award ceremony. You were there.
I was there.
You have quite a presence. You're also writing. You were doing the podcast as well.
I was.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that side of things. When did you discover that you enjoyed being a spokesperson for the industry over and above the very serious work that you do?
Well, yes, there was the serious legal work, but it came out of the fact that clients looked to me not just as a lawyer. They saw me as I think the Italians call it consigliere. It was an advisor. I was like the family doctor, if you will. And as a family doctor, one has the right and the gravitas to give opinions beyond the narrow field of the law. And because people realized that I was genuinely interested, that I would go to shipyards and see yachts being built. I would go to design studios and see how yachts were being designed. I could, at a very micro level, understand what it took to build a yacht. And I understood how the ecosystem worked. I wasn't just the lawyer. I developed a personality, a reputation, a brand, if you will, of someone who was genuinely passionate about the sea and genuinely passionate about this super yacht industry. And because I understood it, people took me more seriously and included me, not just in the serious, scary stuff, but in the fun stuff, because they knew that I was someone that engaged with the industry and wanted to give something back.
Yeah, I think it's the whole expertise. People, if they engage with the personality and they can see through the passion, it's something very authentic. And that brings me to what you're doing now, because I started to have a chat with you about this outside, and I didn't want to hear it twice. So you're doing a PhD at the moment.
Yes.
Tell us more.
PhD, I've been contemplating for a long time, and it has its roots in the 2008 financial crisis. And before I go further, it's a PhD in history. And in 2008, when the world was falling apart and the super yacht world came to a grinding halt, the industry ran around the world looking for the great pot of money that would fund the next generation of super yachts to be built. And it didn't work. And the question I asked myself is, of all the billionaires, we know that approximately 5% engage with the superyacht world. And the question is, why do 95% not engage? And what my thesis seeks to answer is why that is. Why is it that people who could afford super yachts stay away? And why society as a whole has a tendency to be hostile to super yachts? And where does that hostility originate from, given that that hostility wasn't there pre-1945? I mean, there was the great era of super yachts that really started the late Victorian era up until 1939. It was part of the asset portfolio of many wealthy people. You'd have the grand house, you'd have the yacht, and that was quite normal. And people who were not on yachts would engage with it. Now, I found in a flea market a postcard of the Royal Yacht Victoria and Albert II, and I think this postcard is dated around 1912. And whoever sent that postcard, in very small writing, talks with great excitement about taking a little launch and sailing around this royal yacht and all the notables that they saw at Cowes during that week, which was Cowes Week. And it was an excitement that you wouldn't see today. When Oxfam were reporting on the release of the Panama Papers, every time they tweeted about it, they would tweet with a photograph of a super yacht. And that connection between illegal behavior and yachts is a link that's been made culturally. And my thesis is seeking to understand when that began and why it began. And it's not just about jealousy. It is something more deep-seated, and that's what I'm trying to answer in my thesis.
And while you're doing that, 'cause, I mean, that sounds fascinating, but if I understand correctly, you're not practicing law at the moment.
No, I'm a non-practicing solicitor. I retired in 2020, but from time to time, people still seek my counsel.
Like me. The super yacht man must come in for a podcast.
And I mean, I call it grey strokey beard work, where they ring me up and I stroke my beard and I send them a bill. But it is often sometimes marking other lawyers' homework. I mean, I don't do the day-to-day anymore. That's something that was part of my life. But although I achieved a great amount in the law, oddly enough, the law never really sort of identified who I am. And at the age of 57, I said, okay, 57 now, do I still want to be doing this for another 10, 12 years? The answer was no, let's do something else. And that's what I did.
When was the lecturing then? Was this something that you did later on in the legal career?
I mean, I always was asked to guest lecture, deliver master classes, and I delivered a number at my old university, Sussex. And currently I'm delivering a series of master classes for the Yacht Owners Representative program, where the Superyacht Builders Association supported the establishment of a course where people who want to be owners' reps on new construction are introduced to the ins and outs of building a yacht, and I'm delivering the master classes on super yacht construction contracts. which is a lot of fun.
Tell me, well, while you were saying that, I suddenly realized super yacht industry, very new to Cyprus.
Mm-hmm.
And you just said you'd come back from lunch at the marina. And I just wanted to gauge, I mean, I know that you're out of the sort of the daily legal stuff, but was there ever a time when you pondered what was going on here and whether there was something for you here, or is it such a niche market and so small still here that it's going to take time to grow?
I think for me, I mean, the market segment that I worked in for the most of my career was at the very large end, where it was always English law. It was, the 50, 60, 70, 80 meter plus super yachts. And most of that work was being done in London. So there wasn't much for me to come back here. I mean, Cyprus has done exceptionally well in becoming a destination over the last few years, especially because of the construction of the marina. And it is an extraordinarily beautiful marina. And the range of yachts that I just saw a few moments ago are a testament to just how well constructed that marina is. But Cyprus will become more important, is becoming important because it's a destination in itself. I mean, we call this podcast Destination Cyprus. But walking around the marina and seeing some of the yacht management companies here, who I'm familiar with from back in the UK, the fact that they're investing in having people in Cyprus just shows how important Cyprus is to the super yacht world.
And how important is Cyprus to you? Let's talk about why you are here.
Okay. Well, the son of Cypriots, if you will, not if you will, actually the son of Cypriots. Parents came to the UK or went to the UK in 1960, just as Cyprus gained independence, and it's a place that I have fallen in love with and fallen out of love with 1,000 times, but it's always been an important part of my life, and understanding where my parents came from, and understanding that the contradictions between their life in London, where my father was a barber and my mother a seamstress, and you come back to the village of Galabanaiodis, where my grandparents were peasants. They went to the fields, they tended apples, they tended pears, they had a small vineyard. My grandmother made the most extraordinarily powerful red wine that was thick with tannin, and I think you had it by the slice as opposed to the glass. It was that thick, and the zivania that she made, and you had this contradiction of living a life in London, which was all convenience, and then you come to Cyprus and you see a life that is entirely agrarian, and I could not relate or understand what that life was about. And I had family who, having emigrated to London in the 60s and 70s, started to come back. And there was a moment when they were trying to convince me that Cyprus was a place for me to come back to as well. And whenever you tell me to do something, I will do the complete opposite. And there was a moment when I wasn't coming to Cyprus at all. not a hostility as such, but it was kind of, you cannot tell me what.
Antidrastikos.
Pretty much, yes.
Yes.
If you've got something that you stand for, I will stand in opposition to it. And that was part of my makeup. But Cyprus, I mean, when I was 12, 1974 was a huge part of my life. I attended all those early demonstrations. In London, I went to Parliament and lobbied MPs, and the Cyprus cause became a central part of my understanding of Cyprus, and through that, one gets to understand that Cyprus isn't just beaches and mountains, isn't just about good food and good family. Cyprus is a complex nation with a complex history. A few years ago, as we all did, because it was quite fashionable, I did my DNA analysis. And it came back with 0% Greek. No Greek at all. 45% Italian. And a mixture of other things. And I look at my village and where my house is. It overlooks a valley, and opposite is a monastery, Aeos Yannis Lambadistis, which is a World Heritage Site. The oldest part of that monastery is 11th century. We have in the village a stone bridge, which is Venetian. To have 45% of my DNA being Italian, and you look across and see that monastery, and you know the bridge, and Cyprus suddenly becomes a different place. Cyprus isn't about, are you Greek Cypriot, are you Turkish Cypriot? Cyprus becomes a very rich tapestry of complex relationships. In many respects, what we think of ourselves as Cypriots has been very much framed by what happened in 1974. But this is an island state that Shakespeare writes about. In the opening lines of Othello, where the good burghers of Venice are calling for General Othello to come and save Cyprus from the Turkish fleet. He always seems to save Cyprus from the Turkish fleet. You get a real sense of how important Cyprus is. Disraeli once wrote that Cyprus was the key to the Middle East. For such a small nation,
what a beautiful phrase.
We have influenced the world in so many ways, whether it is William Shakespeare or George Michael. It is. We're a very small country with a very loud voice, and this last week I've been up in my village because I'm beginning to work on restoring my house there, the ancestral home, and you get a real sense that this isn't just a place that you have fun in. This is a place with a deep sense of history that sometimes we as Cypriots forget about, that deep sense of history. And by restoring my home, and my intention is to come back and stay here for extended periods to write, because I'm in addition to the PhD, I've just finished writing my first novel, which I'm editing. I'm writing my second novel, so it's a place for me to come and write as well.
That was really beautiful, actually. I'm quite overwhelmed by the last 4 minutes, because I'd never thought about that. And the truth is that we've had so many crises, and we're constantly trying to get our head above water on this island, that it's almost as if we're progressing so fast that we sometimes forget that simplicity. And actually, one of the reasons behind this podcast was exactly that. And if you hear the ident that we composed for the opening, I wanted to get back to the root of authentic Cyprus and what it really means to people. I've been privy to some of your writing, actually, read a few pages of The Olive Garden. And that whole, your description about making the halloumi and somebody being brought breakfast with the village bread and the tomato, the cucumber, the black olives. I mean, those are the things that we all really hold to heart and we love. But we get so busied by the glamour of all of this that has come so quickly to the island.
Well, let's pause for a moment. I spoke about my parents as being peasants originally. I remember my father telling me the moment that electricity came to the village. I remember him telling me about a period when they had no shoes.
Oh yeah, my father's classmates, a lot of them didn't have shoes. And I think I caught black and white television. In fact, we didn't have air conditioning when I was a child.
Well, when I used to come to Cyprus in the 70s, very few people had television. The fact that you would go to the Gafenio, where there would be an unfeasibly large television, and you would gather there at 5 or 5:30 to watch the cartoons, or as we lovingly call them here, all cartoons are Mickey Mouse.
We all sat there for the beginning, the commencement, of
absolutely.
course.
And there was no more than 5 hours of television. No one had a telephone, except in our village there was one telephone, and when a call came in from London, the voices would carry through the village, and you're calling for someone to run up to get the call from London. I mean,
insanity.
Cyprus, within living memory, was, and I know it's an unfashionable term these days, but was a third world country. It was, most people worked in the land. I mean, the idea of the finance sector, the development of Limassol, as it is, was unthinkable in the 70s. And then we had that period, we now have a very, sorry about this, so we have a very large Eastern European community in Limassol these days. We forget that Limassol, for a period, was Beirut on the water. When there was trouble in Lebanon, Limassol was full of people from Lebanon. There was a wonderful restaurant called Scheherazade towards Yermasoya back in the day, which was the best Middle Eastern food you could have anywhere. And Cyprus is constantly adapting and adopting people.
Yeah.
I mean, Cyprus, it always annoys me when people say, are you Greek Cypriot or Turkish Cypriot? No. Cyprus is the original multicultural nation. I mean, we have been invaded and occupied by everyone at some point. And people talk about the Cypriot dialect, and they say, oh, you must speak pure Greek. Why? The Cypriot dialect is rich with our history. Whether we're I mean, we don't have the J sound in Greek. It doesn't exist, but in Cypriot, we have it. We talk about the window, jami. The Turkish word for a mosque is jam. I mean, there are so many words we've borrowed from Turkish, we've borrowed from Italian, we've borrowed from English, we've borrowed from everyone. And it's our linguistic DNA. Cyprus is such a rich nation. We forget sometimes that Cyprus had its own language pre-Greek, which was, I think, based on Aramaic. And if you go to the museum in Nicosia, you can hear an approximation of a reconstruction of what that sounded like. Cyprus, if you come here, you can discover extraordinary things. There's a friend of mine, or a cousin rather, was referring me to a book that he discovered recently about winemaking in Cyprus. And this was published in about 1742. And at that point, winemaking in Cyprus wasn't the most sophisticated, except for my village, Galbaniotis, where the book says that the people who produce wine in Galbaniotis do it with such elegance, and they produce wonderful wine that is not seen anywhere else on the island. And that was 1742. We're not an island that became itself in 1960. We're an island that, much like Aphrodite, that came out of the foam and the waters. Geologists say that Cyprus has come out of the sea. The soil at the top of Rhodos is seabed, and Cyprus grows, I think, by 1 centimeter a year. Cyprus, came out of the sea, much like Aphrodite, and because of that, Cyprus is an extraordinary place that we do her a disservice if all we think of Cyprus is souvla and coffee and ligon. It is much more than that.
I love that you referred to Cyprus as a female like a vessel. Beautiful.
Well, she is.
She is. That was lovely. I think this would be a very good time to ask you then what Cyprus means to you in 3 words, because I know you've probably covered a lot of it, but it sounds to me like it's going to be integral to the next few years for you.
Yes.
How would you describe it?
In 3 words?
Yeah.
I would say heritage.
Mm-hmm.
I would say creativity. And the most important word is love. We are the birthplace of the goddess thereof, and we talk about family, but before there's family, there must be love, because it is from love that family springs.
How often do you think you'll be coming? Do you think your family enjoying coming here as well?
Yes, the whole point of restoring the home is to spend more time here. In fact, along with my brother, we recently acquired our Cypriot nationality. It was a surprise to discover that I've been a Cypriot since 1962, which is when I was born. But I now have my ID card and my passport, so I am
Cypriot.
Pretty much. There we are.
And okay, so this is actually, do you know what? Before I ask you what you would change about Cyprus, just in case there's any tips in here, you wrote a play
years ago
that was performed by Teatro Technis. I don't drive a BMW, and that sounds it. There's such a hint of Cypriot sarcasm in there.
Oh yeah.
Tell me what it's about. I want to know what it's about before we discuss what you would change.
I was then a very, very young writer. But it was this idea that there was a certain class of Cypriot immigrant into the UK who would see success in the guise of the Mercedes or the BMW.
Mercedes.
Yeah. BMW. That was it. And the story centered around your very typical Cypriot grocery store. And there were two children, the son and the daughter. The son worked in the grocery store, bought the BMW, got married, had the 2.2 kids, ticked all the boxes that the traditional Cypriot family would want. And the daughter didn't want any of that. She'd qualified as a lawyer. And this is a long time before I was even contemplating being a lawyer myself. And she didn't follow any of the rules, didn't want the BMW, travelled on public transport, was high street solicitor, wasn't driven by money at all. And throughout the play, you have the father keeps listening to the same song on a scratchy old 45 vinyl, to the point that it's almost, you can't hear it. And at the end of the play, the daughter has found a new copy of this song on vinyl for her father, and puts it on the record and on the record player, and says something to the effect of, just because I don't do everything you want me to do doesn't mean I'm not listening to your music, and I want you to hear your music. So hence she buys him a new version of the old song. And it was that kind of the tension between the old and the new. And just because we want something new doesn't mean we're abandoning the old, which is often, there was often the fear of my parents' generation, that unless we did exactly as they did, we would abandon Cyprus. And for many of us, that wasn't the case. We wanted to find our own route to Cyprus, and our own version of Cyprus, which wasn't necessarily theirs.
It strikes me as, I'm going to go all Steve Bartlett on you now, but you could have gone, I mean, you could have got really carried away with this world, couldn't you? And it sounds like you're not just very grounded, but that you're actually more drawn to your roots than ever.
This world, this Superyacht world, and I worked with some of the richest people in the world, if not the richest people in the world. And I've seen the extremes of wealth. And let me tell you one anecdote. I was visiting a former client of mine in Saint-Tropez, and we'd had some work that we needed to do. And he said, let's go out on one of my yachts. And he had a Mangusta. I think she was about 34 meters in length. And we went out to sea, and we found a cove, and we had a lovely lunch. We went for a swim, had a lovely conversation, and we were coming back. And he sat up front on his own, and he looked like the loneliest man in the world. And in that moment, I realized that none of this, the wealth you cannot take with you, is the values you have as a man or a woman that people will remember. You know, when we all eventually die and people are eulogizing, they will not say how much money you had. They will say what you were like as a person. My late father used to tell me a poem, and to paraphrase, and he said, in the graveyard, the bones of the rich and the bones of the poor are exactly the same. And however long I've got left to live, I'm not going to be, I don't want to be identified by the wealth that I have known. I want to be identified by the person I am. And that is on my terms. And that's got nothing to do with these things. It's been fun, but it's not who I am as a man.
It's very topical, this, for me, because we've been talking about this for a while now, this whole identity and the purpose wheel, and who are you, and do you live by your values, and how do you behave? Is it difficult letting go of the super yacht identity? Is it something that you found hard to transition to being just you?
No, not at all. It's been harder for others because others want to pigeonhole you.
Yeah.
Others want to. It's easy for them to seek to control you by putting you into a box. The fact that I was at the top of my game, according to some guides, I was one of the top 4 lawyers in the world. I made partner in 6 years at Clyde's. I had an amazing time, but I literally chose when to step off the carousel and do something else, because I didn't step into an abyss. I was always the person who wrote. I was always the person who thought. I was always the person who challenged. The fact that there is a life outside the super yacht world it's what's that wonderful film with where the chap is living in this fake world, and suddenly and he's been filmed in every part of his existence, and Jim Carrey's the actor in the film, and at the end of the film he sails a yacht across a fake lake, and he hits the horizon, which is the end of a set, and he opens the door and walks through. And that's what the super yacht world is. It is this bizarre little ecosystem that is very, very real for everyone who's living in it. But it is, you can escape from it if you want to. Others want to live it every day of their life, and that's fine. And I'm not judging them for that. But for me, I decided to sail across that lake and open the door and walk out.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, because I feel like we've been sort of had a window to something a lot greater than we've seen before from you. I'm looking forward to this, having sort of a look at more of your writing, and it'd be great to have you here more often.
I will be back.
And now you need to tell me, if there was one thing you could change about Cyprus, what would it be? You're only allowed one, don't get carried away.
If there's only one thing, I'd love a proper public transport network. I mean, a reliable public transport network. That's what I would love for Cyprus.
Να σου το κανονίσουμε. Thank you very much, John. Enjoy the rest of your stay.
Thank you.
And yes, we will talk again soon about other topics.
I'll be delighted.
Thank you very much, everybody. Don't forget to follow us and drop us an email if you've got any questions, podcast@cybarco.com, and we'll see you next time for another episode of Destination Cyprus. Destination Cyprus, brought to you by Cybarco.